Welcome to our new series, ScaleUp India Roundtables. Today, we are going to be talking about the D2C playbook, winning the consumer market battle. You'll agree with me that in the last 2 years, we've heard so much about D2C brands. We are seeing so many digital brands come up in our country. We have over 650 brands, and this is just growing. And next 10 years is about Indian brands and D2C brands. Traditionally, FMCG companies were spending 9% on their sales and marketing, but the D2C brands are spending upwards of 35%. What does it mean? How do you go on to build a sustainable, strong brand in a market where the consumers are ever demanding and are fickle? Today, we are going to talk to some of the builders in this space, and one brand which I personally and all of us look up to is Wow. We're the founder. From there, we have Trell, which is a platform enabling these D2C brands and influencers who sell to them. We have PayU powering the payment, and we have Bharati from Shopify, who is going to talk to us about what is she seeing with these new, young, emerging brands every day in our country. And some of the topics that we are going to cover today would be around consumer experience. How do you go on to create a super experience when the consumer is getting extremely demanding? How do you look at non-metro cities? How do you look at your payments? How do you look at your growth? And most importantly, what we are going to cover today is how do you scale up? How do you scale up as D2C brands in a country, in India? Thank you so much for joining today. I want to ask you, Bharati, we'll begin with you. How do you get the customer experience right? Because today we are living in a world, increasingly in the D2C world, but the reality of this world is that everyone is expecting best in class at every given moment, and the customer is always right, and they have their expectations have gone through the roof, and they've become very picky. And then today, operating in a D2C world, existing on an everyday basis, growing on an everyday basis means doing everything right by the customer. And this customer who is extremely demanding, how do you get your customer experience right in this context?
Thanks, Shradha. I want to start by saying that all of these have always been true, right? Whether you were a D2C brand or not, as long as you're building something that you want to deliver to an end consumer, these things are true. And I think as a young founder, it's very important to start by remembering that do not sort of be pressured by all the hoopla around building a D2C brand. Remember that you had a passion for this product, this category, this promise, and go back to first principles. And the second thing is to remember that customer experience changes at every level of scale, right? So don't try and, if you're at 10 orders a day, do not try to emulate the customer experience of someone who's at 1,000 orders a day, right? You don't need to solve everything for scale on day one, right? Start by crafting the experience that you had in mind when you decided to go on this journey, and try and make that promise happen every day. And do not worry about taking the time to get that right. Building a D2C brand is not only about the branding and the marketing, it's also about the promise you started with, the product that delivers that promise, and what it takes to iterate and get it right with the first 100 customers and then the first 1,000 customers. And then at every level of scale, there are elements that get added to that experience, that there are parts that become a habit that you can then drive an engine off. So I feel like it's in this world of noise, it's very important as a young founder to stay true to the first principles and remember that many, many brands have been doing this for many, many years. Just remember why you started this, write down that story and try to deliver it with your first 100, then your first 1,000, and take it from there.
Thank you so much, Bharati. While you were saying that this is so true, so it's the, as you said, first principle, and something all the D2C founders should think of. What's your core, what's your ethics, what's your ethos, and what's your story, and why you're doing it. But the challenge is that in today's world, the reality with today's D2C brands is that social media has become so present. जब हम grow कर रहे थे, so that time, you had bad experience. Where do you go and say? Right? Consumer forum or pata nahi kahan. Today, you are irritated with anything, you just go and tweet about it. And that reality your D2C brands are facing, and the heat that they are facing with a very demanding consumer. In that context, and with more context, Manish, I want to ask you, how do you create a wow consumer experience?
Shradha, you have been seeing us so many years, and I think I can tell you year on year, I think it gets a little bit more challenging. There's so much influx of new D2C brands coming in every day, looks like right now. But how do you, I'm not a strong believer of anything called a first market mover in any industry, right? Because they're meant to be disrupted. It's always a pathway to show that you can disrupt. But I think, the game just has to be scaled to the next level every time you think about anything today. The pressure, and it's a very fun time, pressure on how do you give back more to a customer in times like this today, right? We're just thinking about how do we cut the clutter and continue to say why buy us, right? Even after having a pretty solid large customer base, we guys still continue to say what do we do more for customers, right? We get up every day with NPS scores. I had to be an habitual of reading customer reviews. Sad to say the team gets a slack because we have obsession on those kind of metrics. But one thing what says everybody is getting into that, and how do you get that to the next level from what you built from is something which is like going beyond that, right? If you've seen us all these years, we've always been ahead of packaging innovation. We were the first guys to bring in paper tube packaging a couple of months back. Consumers kept saying about it. What are you doing for the environment? We're the first D2C brand to start shipping seeds with every order you place in with us. There has to, I mean, we're beyond that product as a company now. It's all about how do you sell emotions to a consumer. Marketing and the product deliverabilities are extremely critical, but the wow experience is, I think now at scales where we are, how do you automate it? How do you make it less robotic? How do you get it to the next level point of view on engagement with your consumers, community building? A lot of things what you always said won't work are some things which have to work now for you. So I think that those are times you have to detour on point of view on how it is. The game has just changed so drastically over the last 6-8 months. And I think Indian consumers are the ones who deserve to get a lot of quality brands giving those kind of experiences online. The benchmark is really like raised. Who's selling a better story? It's like now how you're going to cut the clutter is going to be something which is going to be a challenge from where it is easy to get to 0 to 100 crores nowadays. I think that 100 to 500 crores is also going to get easier, but I think it's a very, very interesting time. I think I continue to say that this decade will be D2C and will be consumer brands coming out of India. But at our end, we'll continue to do unimaginables, what even the large competitors we are fighting with, and also some of the strong competitions what we have. How do you cut the clutter? Marketing, engagement, user experience. How do you get loyalty back? Because today Indian consumers want to keep trying, and that's something that already into saying, this is something I'm going to use for the next 10-15 years. I'm not going to move from there. I think I'm a strong believer that whichever brands does the highest amount of trials in the next 3 to 5 years will emerge the winner in 10 years from now. So I think wow engagement on how do you engage with consumers, we are always looking at innovative ways. How do you keep your consumers intact? And that's going to be something which is going to be a challenge going ahead.
Yes, Manish. Bimal, I want to ask you, and then today Trell as a platform is also engaging with a lot of influencers, and I'm told that now for D2C brands, influencers are the go-to marketing. And Manish, we'll come to that, but tell us what are some of the trends that you're seeing, and how would you say we should look customer experience?
Thanks, Shradha. And I'll just continue from where Manish left, right? So if you talk about D2C brands as of today, it would be of no surprise if I say it's a D2C 2.0. The journey is a 2.0 journey. I think in the 1.0 journey, it was all about the e-commerce players or the platforms are pretty much established, infra, a logistic infra, right? So, and second is in 1.0 journey, a lot of users started coming online. That means it provided every D2C brand to build their own channel, to build their own cohorts on their own channel. And third is on the contract manufacturing side, right? They were abnormally high MOQs where only major brands could deal into launching products. That barrier was reduced in 1.0 journey where the MOQs were reduced. Now, if you talk about the 2.0 journey, it is where the MOQs are even abnormally lower, right? I mean, you could launch beauty product with as low as 2,000 to 3,000 MOQs per SKU. Contract manufacturing has gone from kind of an OEM to an ODM phase where they also come with a catalog. It's just you got to say, and you say this is a catalog I love to have, and they're going to produce and give it to you within 15 days, and you can launch. So what we are witnessing today is everyone is willing to launch a D2C product because everyone aspires to become an entrepreneur from home. And I've seen this interesting insights where college students coming out of NEF saying we're going to launch our own labels. I've seen college students making pocket money by selling D2C brands online. Such low is the entry barrier with the infra that we have developed. But at the same time, what also has happened is it is leading to a lot of chaos. So today, what most of the founders are not able to understand is there are a lot of products in the market, but not many brands. A brand is where they are successfully able to tell a story to an end consumer, why they exist and what they're solving, right? If that is not done well, the only thing that you're playing upon is performance marketing and on pricing as a lever. So most of the D2C brands, so-called D2C brands, are actually perishing. In fact, there's this, we call it D2C chasm from the platform point of view, like post 30 CR annualized revenue run rate for PPC brands, most of them do not cross beyond it. They actually fail, right? Because they're only focused on perf. They're not focused on building brands. Like Manish talked about, right? Building a great narrative or a story is very important for D2C brands today. And what we believe is influencers play a pivotal role in this. In fact, what's happening is there are two types of campaigns that brands have to engage with. One is, your ATL campaigns, whenever you have a new launch, new product line, that is where you go and tell to the world that this is what we have innovated for you. But apart from that, what's interesting is brands should also have a real-time strategy. That means on a day-to-day basis, they should engage with influencers and make sure that they're communicating to the end consumer why they're still relevant, why the story is still relevant to them. If not, there are 10 other brands who are going to come and take your space, right? And by the time the repeat cohort comes to buy your product, you have 9 more products telling the same story, right? So that's why it's very influencers would play a key important role in this, to have that story communicated to the end user on day-to-day basis. So I say this is a real-time marketing, right? It's not campaign, real-time marketing, and going forward, influencers will play a very pivotal role in it, right? And that's how we see it. And the data also talks about it, right? If you look at the online video consumption, stands at 325 million today, that vernacular video consumption, right? And video is the way where you can tell your story. People have become lazy. Our attention spans are lower than a goldfish. So in that environment, unless until you do not use videos, you do not use engaging videos, you do not use influencers, and you're not telling your story real-time basis, you would not stay relevant even if your story is strong. So have a strong story and tell it real-time on everyday basis, for that influencers will play a key and pivotal role.
Bimal, I can see you extremely passionate, and I have to tell everyone watching, look at Trell very closely. They are doing brilliant job, and for all their D2C brands, their story is very important. And now coming to you, Shobhit, would love to hear from you, because customer experience is also about every kind of experience, from how quickly can you check out, how quickly can you pay and not disappear when you look at the money. And there's so much of innovation happening on the payment front. I was told that when you're buying a super premium brand, then you can do a EMI. So in payments also a lot of customization is happening. What would you say when it comes to D2C brands and some of the things that they should be looking at?
So I think you kind of banged it right on, right? Like, I think the important thing to do for a D2C brand, because as compared to some of the established brands, you're already starting with a little bit of a trust deficit, at least, when you're acquiring a customer for the first time, you're a new company, people have not heard of you. One, it's really, really important for you to have as sort of seamless an experience, give people the least amount of options to want to abandon the cart or want to move out. So, I think payment experiences today provide a lot of different options. Everybody knows about UPI and cards. You hit on buy now, pay later, which is something that is really helping acquire new customers for D2C brands. So, I think just offer as many payment modes. Young people like to pay in very different ways than, my generation or people after me like to pay. So you want to make sure that you are offering as many payment options as possible. There's as little friction as possible in the process. usage of tokenization to ensure that you can, stay compliant with RBI at the same time, save cards so that people don't have to enter card information again and again. Use SDKs if you have an app. So, like a lot of UPI, ends up with 2 or 3 super apps like PhonePe or Google Pay. So, people don't have to sort of go through the SMSs and find. So use whatever is available in terms of payment innovation to ensure that the friction is very less. I also feel, we analyze industry-wise data at PayU to see, what sectors are doing well, etc. One of the things that we have realized is that a lot of sort of new D2C brands or like, the good versus bad, the good brands tend to engineer for loyalty and not engineer for acquisition. So, I think there is the game to acquire customers probably a little easier today than to sort of retain them because of the market conditions. And even today, only some of the top brands actually have, incentives for people to be loyal to them. So, there's a lot of incentive. You give out a coupon, 30% off, 40% off. But, when you think about it, once you purchase the brand twice or thrice, the 30% off really doesn't appeal as much anymore as, access to new products, having an ability to sort of ask for what you want. Subscription models, which are very, very popular in other countries, have not sort of kicked on in India as much. A lot of D2C brands in UK or in the US, instead of offering you like standalone products, they'll just sign you up for a monthly package and, they'll send you new products as well as existing products. Some of those things I feel need to be sort of explored a bit more in India. And like, I think the data very clearly says, brands which we've seen grow very fast on our platform in the last 2 years or so are really the ones who get repeat customers more often, the ones who get the same customer to shop, come back like in the first 10, 15 days, or, higher percentage of customers coming back again and again. Other ones, Manish is representing one of them here, so they're aware of it. But those are kind of companies that are doing well, whereas brands which tend to acquire very heavily but don't have great loyalty mechanisms tend to fail.
Yeah, I'm picking from you, Shobhit. Good brands engineer for loyalty, not just for acquisition. And then I think that's a very, very powerful statement. And we'll come to Manish and ask him about what is he engineering for loyalty. Bharati, you would be looking at so many D2C brands today and the enthusiasm and the excitement. And right now it's a frenzy, if I may say so, because like we discussed that today, everyone is looking at this space very closely. When it comes to understanding your consumer, understanding the data, understanding the intelligence around the ever-changing, fickle consumer, how do you suggest that the brand should look at it? And then what are some of the things that they can do to understand their consumers very well?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to obsess over it, right? I think every founder starts with the intention of spending time listening to their consumers. I mean, we as well at Shopify, we're trying to talk to our merchants all the time and understand what are the gaps, what are we trying to do to fill it. And I think every founder starts with that intention, but somewhere along the way, your time is not yours. And you sort of start losing track of that, right? But I've seen that the best brands are speaking to their consumers every week through the ranks, right? From the founder down to the last mile person. They're obsessing with the feedback that people leave them on their website and otherwise. And they have a really good system in place to actually incorporate it. And, Shradha, I cannot emphasize more how critical this is in the early days, right? Because I think a lot of founders I meet in the early days especially feel like, 10 order aa rahe hain, 100 customers, 1,000 customers, kya farak padta hai? What do we really know? What patterns? I would say to them, you started this brand because you thought you do this problem best. Trust your instinct and marry it with the data, right? And obsess over every single reading that comes through and see what you're learning from it. And of course, as you grow, then invest in the tools, right? There's so many tools available today. And I think the beautiful things that online does, and especially D2C does, is between purchases, you can do so much for the consumer. This was never possible when you were selling in GT or in modern retail, right? What are you doing from when a customer bought to when he's coming back to you? What are you doing right after a customer buys to keep them engaged? I think, like Shobhit rightly said, I think today brands are at best maybe signing you up to newsletter, but there are so many other ways to engage with them, making them part of your new product launches, making them feel exclusive. Invest in understanding who your super customer is. It's everything, right? If you know who your super customer is and then you're able to replicate that, What is the data that is telling you that? So I'd say in the early stages, marry your instinct, even if the data is limited. And as the data grows, think about what you're doing between one purchase and another. And what are you doing to constantly collect feedback and act on it? Is there a loop? It's never too early and it's never too late.
Brilliant. For me, first time, this insight, what are you doing between one purchase to the other? Yeah, because I don't think so. And Manish, don't get me wrong, but the brands don't talk between one purchase to the other as much, right? And you tell me, because I'm your WoW fan. So tell me, what are you doing between one purchase to the other? Because so many people have millions have purchased you.
So Shradha, as you know, with more D2C brands getting funded, inspiration from women on how many entrepreneurs want to just pop up being D2C, obviously advertising is getting extremely expensive. And we've seen it happen over the years. I think one motto is how do you get consumers coming and buying you and how do you keep them sticky? So we working from a 90 to a 120 days customer journey. It's drafted on what do you do on day 1, day 8, day 15, day 30, day 60, day 90. I think it's I'm so agreeing on the flow of where the customer engagement has to be. Today, there's something called WhatsApp commerce. Not so many people are using it right now. I think we are the first few to use it 4 months back. But I see commerce of the world doing it. You got abandoned carts happening, customization on WhatsApp commerce, which is coming up, which is just booming out. Very less people using it, but you're getting the highest amount of engagement going there. Loyalty program is extremely critical. Building your own community on your own and your own VIP circle, inner circle in your own base is so important. See, building brands and building loyalty is all in a consumer's mind. How much you can reach out and be relevant to them is something which you play out on, right? There's so much to be done. Everybody is now moving into house of brand strategy, right? So we are looking at how do we pull consumer who might have had a dandruff issue moving into an acne issue or moving them into our fragrances brand. I think everybody is trying to get those journeys and everything mapped up. Technology is getting more and more relevant. We got something called Pro Points at our end. You do X amount of targets and achievements on your buying and loyalty, you get X amount of rewards. What you get. We have tied up with PVR as an example for the whole year. Every Fridays we give movies out to our consumers out. Every month I encourage my leadership to get onto 8 committee meetings with the consumers, the detractors, promoters. And I love to get into all of them. It'll be like it's a well-organized chart where you understand what customers hated about you that month, what they loved about you that month. Then you get into another one to understand what what your competition is doing much more. I think it's getting really interesting and really, really like if you crack this, you're through to the next level. So I think loyalty extremely critical. Anybody not investing into loyalty and where it is, then I think it's just going in a pit of, because today's consumer mindset is only there for a day or two after he's bought it. We have to always look at being innovative on how do you keep that engagement on.
Absolutely. Because the consumer will then root for you and buy a lot from you and regularly. Now that brings me to the question. I think we can, continue talking, but Bimal and Shobhit, 2 questions, and then we'll come back. One is, of course, on the data and how do you think that people should look at data? But more importantly, I want to go to the heart of D2C conversation today, that consumers are no more in Bombay, Bangalore, Delhi, and these cities. What D2C has also brought close is that now you can be sitting anywhere. लुधियाना में, पटना में, कहीं पे भी आप हो सकते हैं और बहुत उससे भी छोटे शहरों में हो सकते हैं. And you can buy anything you want today. How do you think should brands look at consumers who are not in these big cities? And what should be your strategy? How should you think about them? Because India is not homogeneous at all, right? Like सब मतलब हर कोना एक अलग है अपने में. How should you think about it?
Yeah, I think from a platform point of view, we've seen this, and that's what we believe the next set of growth for the brands and e-commerce would be the tier 2 and tier 3 markets, specifically in the categories that we're talking about, right? Where D2C are flourishing under consumption upgraders categories. We've seen that tier 2 and tier 3 markets have a great appetite and are very experimentative. In fact, for certain categories such as personal care, for us the AOV's average order value is higher in tier 2 plus cities compared to tier 1 cities, right? But at the same time, what we've also seen is the brand stickiness is as low as 45%. That means if they like, they're going to buy. Even if they like, they're going to buy other brand food just to experiment and try out what's happening. So the stickiness is extremely low, but the appetite is extremely high. So we've seen this happening. Second, solely speaking for D2C brands, what I've also observed is, most of the brands, I mean, with also the capital being, deployed into building these D2C brands, I've seen most of the D2C brands are actually competing only in two spaces, the English market and a bit of Hindi market, right? What's happening with it is, you can't double the eyeballs. You cannot say tomorrow I need 4x eyeballs in this market. Like, eyeballs would still remain the same for a D2C brand. So because of which the investment into the perf, the ROAS used to be good back in the days. I mean, Manish would talk about it, but today, if you look at the ROAS, right, it's abysmally low. And you would
the ROAS used to be 3x, now it's 0.1.
Yeah. And it's abysmally low for the same reason that the cohort is not expanding at the pace in which the capital is being deployed. There are only two eyeballs. So then what we talk to all of the brands is, you've got to have a cohort expansion, market expansion. You've got to go to tier 2 and tier 3 markets. But also case in point is when you're moving to this market, though they have great appetite, the story again is different. You got to customize your offerings to each market. So what we've seen is, the markets in South, the Kerala markets, how they look at hair solutions, the Andhra, Telangana markets, how they look at hair solutions versus a Marathi market. They're completely different, right? Their needs for hair, the type of the texture of the hair that they have is completely different from a Bengali market. Second is pricing conversations. Now you have a differentiated offering for them. What is the right price point? Most of the brands get it wrong. They think, pricing it a bit higher will allow me a good GM with which I can invest into perf. That's not how it works. You have to be still accessible to them, though you have a great story. So a great pricing point and a great localized strategy, and on top of it, using video to tell the story. If these three things are adopted by a brand, they would immediately expand their cohorts, right? And the path to a 100 CR brand or 500 CR brand would become easier. And I mean, this is what I've seen from a platform point of view. It's an amazing market in tier 2 and tier 3. You just have to have those offerings ready.
How do you as a brand make that happen? And this is an open question to all the D2C brands who will be observing this. But Shobhit, tell me, what do you have to say?
I think one of the things I wanted to add, when you mentioned tier 2 cities, Shradha, because I think I also, in my mind, when I think tier 2 cities, I think the same cities you said, your Ludhiana and your Chandigarh and your Lucknow and your Patna, but I actually looked into our data and actually, so one thing about tier 2 cities, at least online, is the cities which do well in terms of online transactions are not your Lucknow and your Patna and your Chandigarh. It's actually your Vijayawada and Coimbatore and Kochi. So that was, so I just wanted to sort of bring that up that, I think the historical consumer goods version of tier 2 has always been cities in the north and center of India, Hindi speaking. So when we talk about vernacularization, but the data actually suggests that cities in the west and south, I think, are a little bit more online. And if you are a D2C brand looking to go online, the first step should be to actually look at the data actually which D2C, you don't want to spend crores on vernacularization only to realize that most of your market was in Kerala or in Kochi, and you ended up doing
brilliant point actually.
So the data actually suggests that the cities in the south and west, at least so far, are a little ahead of their counterparts in the north and the east when it comes to going online, and therefore everything you do has to be around that. Two, I think there are other challenges to so one is obviously the branding and the marketing side, but one of the things that we face, we see frequently is tier 2 cities, returns are much higher, logistical problems are much higher. You don't have your brigades and your DLFs and these large societies in tier 2 cities. Addresses are a little all over the place. Logistics, last miles are not that great. So, I mean, I think, an experience is as much about sort of creating the narrative as much as it's about fulfilling the promise. And I think getting into tier 2 cities requires a little bit more thought in terms of distribution, in terms of, maybe if you don't have it, think of having an address verification services. There's a bunch of companies now which sort of allow you to sort of pre-verify an address and things like that. I think the technology stack also needs to change a little bit if you're going to go whole hog into D2C in tier 2 cities. That's at least, so if you look at the data, I think these are two things that at least stand out from us our data, and that's something we would recommend to any D2C brand.
Yeah, and Shobhit, on that note, I also want to ask you that we have just discussed about money and while most people can now pay online, it's still there are a lot of barriers to paying online. Do you see that change? Because now we are talking about India D2C, that abhi sabke sab online pay kar rahe hain. What is your data showing when it comes to payments?
So cash continues to go down, every quarter. So I think that's not like news to anybody. I think especially with UPI and buy now pay later, cash is becoming less and less of a sort of option. Although I work for an online payments company, I always remember, Manas, who heads product for us. I met him in a sort of, both of us in a previous avatar, and we had this discussion on cash. And he kind of said it really well. Even online payments come at a charge. You do pay like a 1 to 2% fee for every online transactions. Cash comes at that as well. So I think, even though cash is on its way out, if you're a D2C brand, just sort of baseline the cost and go for it. I don't think, cash is, if you really, especially if you're trying to grow, if you're trying to get into a new market, incentivize people to pay online, which I think a lot of good brands have started doing really well now, especially your big guys like Amazon, Flipkart. So incentivize customers to pay online, but at the same time, don't think of cash as this sort of total outlier, because if you pay 1.5 to 2% on online payments, you'd end up paying about 3 to 4% for cash. But at the cost of acquisition, I think that's a risk worth taking if you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah, Bharati, I want to ask you for the merchants, for your customers and the D2C brands that leverage Shopify. What are some of the things? How do you is there some intelligence? Is there some special effort that you make as a brand to ensure that they optimize on their consumer experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way we think about it, Shradha, is especially for our younger entrepreneurs, right? And true for everyone, how do we give them time back to focus on building the business and the brand by giving them a technology platform that they don't need to worry about? When they go to sleep at night, they're not thinking about which part of this is not working, right? I think that is the starting point. Can we just be this person that takes that headache away? And then the second part of that journey is, how do we help them do more with us, right? So this could be anything from, how can we help them power better checkout? How can we introduce options that help them convert better? How can we help them talk to their customers post a purchase and bring them back? And there's, if you look at our app stores, there's constantly things, especially in India, I have to say, that are coming up from our partners that are helping brands do more with the platform. So I'd say these are the two things. I think for starters, we don't want the entrepreneur to ideally spend any time worrying about keeping his or her business up, right? And the second is, at every stage of the customer journey, are we giving them tools to do business better on the platform, right? I also just want to go back to the tier 2 conversation, if you don't mind. And the one thing that I feel is that what we know now is that consumers in these cities are definitely discovering new brands and promises online, right? But as brands, I think it's important to also think how you're going to be distributed in these cities. It may not always be just your website, right? Understanding how a consumer can access you in that city, whether it's through modern trade, a combination of modern trade, general trade, and your own website, can also unlock a lot of opportunity, right? In China, I remember a few years back, I've seen consistently brands use website purchase information to inform where they should go next. And also studying local brands, right? Especially given the diversity of India, studying how local brands are getting distributed, where are they focusing on? Like if you were a FMCG food brand today in the south of India, I would actually study who are the guys, where are the leaders getting distributed, right? And how are consumers finding them, and what are you doing to be there? So while discovery is definitely like accelerated by the internet, I think the way consumers access your product can actually be multifold, right? And that's something to keep in mind as you think about tier 2.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bharati. Very useful. I can go on having this conversation, but last one question to all of you, if you could answer. 2021 has been 2020, 2021, both these years have been tough. And then it's a rhetoric if I say it's tough, but as leaders, as people, as builders, if I had to ask you, what has been one significant learning that you carry with you, which uh, shows which shows some transformation in the way you operate as a leader? What would that be?
For us, it was always about, I think 2021 was when we launched a commerce, as we talked about, right? Accessibility is one thing that we've learned. If you stay humble and you stay accessible, right? I think people would walk into your store any point of time, right? So this is the greatest learning that we've got in 2021, which we're going to take forward in 2022. Also work closely with our stakeholders like Manish, etc., to understand how can we be more humbler and more accessible going forward. So that concept of D2C at large is, what is D2C? It's the power of democratization, right? So that means it provides an equal opportunity for all the stakeholders, for our customers to get access to a more number of brands for the solutions, for brands to reach out to a more number of customers, and for everyone to become an entrepreneur, right? I think 2022 is going to be that theme. It's going to be the age of anyone can become an entrepreneur, right? So that's why it's very important to stay humble and accessible.
That's very, very true. Yeah.
See, I think at our end, I think we have no choice other than being humble. And I think that's always the best way forward. I don't think so we should change as individuals, leaders ever. I think one thing is very critical is 2020 and 2021 has been actually very interesting. I wouldn't say it was tough. It was good. We've seen a phase of the online search. Now we will all see a little bit of an online fatigue, which we are going to go through with offline opening up. And it's even more better time to be more humble and being a little bit more proactive on how consumer behavior will move. What we're seeing right now is a online fatigue. Over the last few months, we would have seen how Amazon, Flipkarts of the world have not had the best of Diwalis, right? Because that's a pure point of a online fatigue, what everybody is going through. When you came last 1 year back and I told you we are 3x up, I mean, growing, but with the dip of the online fatigue, it's very important. Speed, agility at our scale has to also continue to be. Today, it's not only about me being a leader. I've got 7-8 other leaders who have come from pretty large organization. How do they take the company to the next level? And I continue to say is that I think customers has to be put in front of anything and everything we do. Line of sight towards that is dropped off. We are in trouble. But I wouldn't write off and say 2020 and 2021 was bad. I think it was a very good and interesting year for all. Love what Bimal's doing, keeping on being humble, continue to be humble. Everybody will have a time to be ruthless. Everybody will have a time for that, but it's not the time today. Today, I think there's so much to capture. None of us are too big none of us have built any business which is too big to fail yet. So I think that is something which you have to do. Even if it's too big to fail, there are so many examples on where we can take from people on how a business can be built on being humble. I love one of your traction on the good guys also win. I don't remember which of the company got funded in the US. I forgot.
Freshworks.
Yeah. So those are, we all D2C. There's a pressure to be D2C. You read reviews, you read any Instagram, like new post comes, you will have one customer who's really upset and I want one customer to be, though some people say, you shouldn't be spending that time on one customer, that one bad customer on a bad review can go and tell 10 of them, and the customer who liked the product won't tell more than 1 or 2. So I think it's very important to continue to keep customers on the driver's seat.
And then building an Indian brand is not easy, which becomes aspirational, which people talk about. And yes, can that be tomorrow all over the world is the question you have to ask.
We are building teams and processes for that. Rome was not built in a day. I keep telling that to the team. It's all a process. Shopify does a brilliant job for us. Look at the tech point. We do sizable business, not being on Magento where the whole world is crashing into. We want to keep the business simple and scalable where it is. That's the best thing to do.
Bharati, what do you have to say?
I want to start by saying thank you, Manish, for that. We're so proud of what you've built at WOW. And I think for us, it's been, at least for me, it's been to listen and learn, right? I think COVID's given us time to pause, whether we liked it or not, and then to listen, right? And the consumer is really moving faster than all of us, right? For us, it's our merchants. And we have to all actively make time to be close to them and listen to them all the time. and iterate, and you're never good enough, right? Every day you can be better. And as long as you listen and try and work on that, I feel like everyone moves forward. And that's the only way to sort of get out of 21, I think.
Yeah. Listening and learning. Absolutely. Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, I think my personal thing is the last 2 years have taught a lot of us, the value of decency in sort of corporate or public life. We've seen several large organizations, brands, individuals, personalities destroyed because of, the lack of sort of sympathizing or empathizing with what was happening around us. And, similarly, like I'm fortunate to work for an organization which has grown in this time. And, all of us are part of an ecosystem which has, been very resilient, in fact, grown. It's purely because people who are trying to do the right thing, people who are trying to be decent, people who are trying to do right by the society around them are more immune to any of these system shocks than somebody who's just trying to make a quick buck or somebody who's trying to be inauthentic. So I think the value of decency is kind of very reaffirmed in the last 2 years for most of us.
Wow, thank you. This has been a brilliant conversation. Honestly, a lot to learn, and it was such an authentic and genuine conversation. And for all the entrepreneurs who have been listening and who have come till the end of this, a lot of learnings. And then hope you all go on to build a super brand and a very, very powerful year for yourselves in 2022. Thank you so much. I hope this conversation was very useful. Stay tuned for more such conversations with ScaleUp India Roundtables. This series is powered by PayU.